Perfect. Okay, everyone, welcome to today's space where we'll be covering account abstraction and chain abstraction. So I'm Alex, social media manager at Etherspot, and I'll be hosting this conversation where we'll dive deep into what these two concepts really mean, how they impact both users and developers, and clear up some of the biggest misconceptions floating around every now and then. Now, this is a super relevant discussion because both AA on the earlier days and chain abstraction more recently are often, thrown around as the next big thing in Web3 user experience, but there's still a lot of confusion about how they work, how they differ, whether they are actually competing or complementary. So today we're here to set the record straight in a way. And to do that, I'm joined by Annie. Annie, great to have you here. Would you mind introducing yourself to the
Sure.
audience?
It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Alex. I lead partnerships and growth at Etherspot, where we are actively working to scale account abstraction adoption within the larger Web3 ecosystem. And I'm just happy to be here and sort of put to rest, what exactly is account abstraction, what is chain abstraction, whether these two are actually opposing. I know that we call this AA versus CHA, but I also want to see, explore a couple of conversations around whether these two are actually, two ends of a spectrum. Are these, diametrically opposed, or is it that they work together as well? So I'm really excited to sort of dive into these topics and see where the conversation goes.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure it will be an interesting conversation. So, well, before we jump into the questions, let's quickly set the stage. You briefly mentioned your work at Etherspot, so I'll dig a bit deeper on that.
Mhm.
So Etherspot is an account abstraction infrastructure provider dedicated to helping developers create seamless Web3 user experience across EVM compatible chains. Our journey started back in 2017 with the Pillar wallet, which was actually one of the first EVM wallets. And we quickly realized that traditional EOAs made blockchain interactions unnecessarily complex, which led us to introduce smart accounts, unlocking new possibilities, even before Ethereum L2s were widely available. Fast forward to today, and Etherspot has been at the forefront of account abstraction, working with major teams such as, the Ethereum Foundation on the shared mempool initiative that recently went live on mainnet. Um, to name a few, the Scanda bundler, for example, helps optimize transaction processing, reducing gas costs and improving security with MEV protection. The RCAP Paymaster enables gasless transactions and sponsored transactions, allowing users to pay gas fees in any supported ERC20 token, or eliminating gas costs. In the end, making it easier for users to interact with dApps, and that's what developers want. That's the kind of experience they want to provide. So more recently, we launched the ERC7579 modular SDK, allowing developers to create customizable smart accounts, which provides enhanced security and user experience. And beyond account abstraction, we're actively working on chain abstraction as well. Some of you may have heard about Etherspot Pulse, our upcoming chain abstraction solution, which is designed to enable devs to provide their users with a truly seamless experience across multiple chains without needing to switch networks or manually bridge assets. So, as a team that has been deeply involved in both account abstraction and chain abstraction, I feel like we're in a great position to break down the similarities, the differences, and some of the misconceptions surrounding these concepts. So, we're talking about account abstraction, which has been around for a while, with, early discussions dating back to when Vitalik proposed to improve Ethereum's user experience by moving beyond traditional EOAs. And so All in all, account abstraction enables smart contract wallets, gasless transactions, session keys, programmable security, fundamentally shifting how users interact with the blockchain. Um, and so this gained real traction with ERC 4337, which introduced a decentralized and permissionless way to enable account abstraction without changes to the Ethereum protocol, which brought key components like user ops, bundlers, paymasters, entry points, etc., making features like gas sponsorship, batch transactions, custom account logic accessible to developers. On the other hand, chain abstraction is a newer, not new, concept that has been gaining momentum. So, at first glance, they might seem like completely different solutions because, chain abstraction is more focused on that multi-chain interoperability. But are these actually two sides of the same coin? That's what we're here to figure out today. So let's kick things off with the basics. So Annie, can you break down some of the fundamental concepts behind account abstraction and chain abstraction to those who might be new to this terminology?
Absolutely. So, very interestingly, today when we speak of account abstraction, we talk about ERC 4337, and sort of everything that sort of comes with ERC 4337. But when I first joined the team, I think Etherspot has been doing sort of working on account abstraction before it was even a thing, right? Because it essentially just boils down to making efforts and building something valuable that's going to simplify people's user experience. So account app, and I think I've seen it evolve from that to sort of where we are at today, and we've come a very long way in the past 1.5 to 2 years, right? So the way that I would break down account abstraction is we need to first look at what was there traditionally, which is before AA was we had a wallet. You have your normal EOA, you have your MetaMask ledger, whatever that might be, and it had a lot of complexity associated with it. Right, you have your public keys, you have your private keys, you have something called signatures, which every transaction, you have an RPC network which needs to be changed every time. And assuming that you had a multi-chain wallet back then, you have to change your RPC network, all of these sorts of things, right? Every chain has its own gas tokens, and it's a whole thing. So every time that we had onboarded a user who wanted to interact with anything on chain, they had to learn all of these things. They had to basically take a crash course on figuring out how each of them work with each other, each of these components work with each other, and how they should be responsible for their own funds. But with the advent of account abstraction, and I think this is one of the greatest advances that we made in sort of simplifying UX, because we sort of brought in these more these features like gasless transactions or sponsor transactions through paymasters, which is an integral part of the account abstraction infrastructure. Then you had custom security policies which could be put into your wallets. So you have smart contract wallets which came in. You have your session keys, which essentially allows dApps to auto sign your transactions, right? And transaction batching, which has been there for a while, where let's say you're staking a certain amount of funds from Polygon to Arbitrum into some sort of protocol. You usually have like about 7 to 8 steps, a bunch of swaps and bridges to make, multiple signatures to do, and it just puts all of that together into like a single click experience, right? So this is essentially what account abstraction entails. It's The ERC 4337 specifies the kind of infrastructure which consists of bundlers, paymasters, smart contract wallets, and a certain set of essentially off-chain infrastructure that work together to make sure that you can interact with on-chain assets in a very, very seamless manner. Now, chain abstraction, and I think it's sort of self-evident in the way that chain abstraction's title itself, is that if account abstraction focused on abstracting the wallet experience, right, which is your essentially your account as we call it, chain abstraction functions on a more protocol level, and it sort of focuses on how is it that we can make interoperability between chains multi-chain transactions a lot more simpler and a lot more seamless, right? Now, one of the biggest vulnerabilities, just for a bit of context, and I know that I'm giving you the long answer here, Alex, so just bear with me, right? Um,
It's fine. It's fine.
when you've got even in the traditional account abstraction infrastructure, and right now even in our prime and modular SDKs, we work with a bunch of different dexes and bridges and aggregators to be able to make the interoperability happen in the backend, right? You need to still bridge your assets, you still need to swap out your assets, and all of this happens. But chain abstraction removes this complexity by making these different chains that we are active on work together in the background. So essentially, what that means is that with chain abstraction, once it becomes more widespread, people can interact with dApps across multiple chains without even knowing about it. AA to a great extent already abstracts that experience, but now imagine that you don't even need to worry about which dApp is on which chain. You can sort of just interact with a dApp, not necessarily a dApp on a specific chain, right? Second thing is that the way that this happens is through routing of liquidity. So in the backend, chain abstraction enables specifically this, which is the liquidity automatically moves between different chains, and therefore the experience gets abstracted away. And that's what we call as chain abstraction. And in fact, we can take this a step further, where not when you got liquidity that is getting routed across different chains in a lot more seamless manner, in a completely back-end manner, so can the gas fees and the gas fee related experience as well. So something that's already enabled by the paymasters, it becomes a lot more seamless, where gas fees can be paid in any token on any chain. So you might be having something as simple as a stable coin on some chain X, and then and someplace else on chain Y is where you're actually hosting this particular transaction. As of now, even with paymasters, you still have you have a certain dependency in terms of whether somebody's sponsoring your transaction. It becomes completely normal. Otherwise, if it's a gasless transaction, then you need to look at which tokens are supported to be able to pay your different your gas fees, etc. Now you don't even need to bother about that. Gas fees can be paid in any token on any chain. So the way that I would probably put together in like sum this whole thing up in a quick analogy is something that I think even Michael likes to use a lot. Is when you use your card, your credit card, or your debit card, it doesn't matter, whether you are in India, you're in the US, Europe, it doesn't really matter, right? Your transaction gets debited from your home currency and gets paid out in the local currency. And I think that's essentially a very good analogy to visualize chain abstraction.
Yeah, for sure. Really, I think the easiest way to kind of explain, to the broader audience how these concepts work is really relating them to real world situations. So, I think it's a great example, of how they work. So, my next question is, connected to these two terms in a way that do you feel like they are solving entirely different problems, or that they are actually complementary pieces of the same puzzle?
I think, no. The short answer is no. Account abstraction, chain abstraction, I think are very closely interlinked as well. To me, they are both, if you have account abstraction as the first step towards, one of the earlier steps towards solving the UX problem that's plaguing all of us, then chain abstraction is the natural next evolution of this, right? But they solve different parts of the UX problem, right? Account abstraction is about simplifying the way that the users would interact with wallets. Specifically, the wallet experience is what underwent a huge change from an EOA to a smart contract wallet, right? But chain abstraction is now taking the smart wallet you already have solved at the wallet level. Now you're taking it to the next level by simplifying interactions across multiple blockchains, right? So that is, essentially the gist in terms of the way that AA and sort of CA sort of fit together. Like, just to give you an example, is account abstraction would remove the need for, let's say, a private key, or the need for private key management. It would take away things like gas fees. You don't need to be particularly bothered about gas fees. But what happens in the backend is still swaps and bridges, right? Now, regardless of how seamless you make the experience, swaps and bridges are still like a huge area where you've got slippages, you have lack of liquidity, you have like sometimes bridging doesn't go through effectively, it opens you up to a bunch of vulnerabilities, all of these things. Now, chain abstraction removes the need to manually switch these chains. It removes the need to sort of bridge these assets, right? So, in fact, I would say that when you combine account abstraction with chain abstraction, they could create like a very unified, very Web2 like experience for Web3.
Yeah, that's a great answer because so from what I hear, right, and that's the same impression I get when we're going through account abstraction, chain abstraction is it all comes down to the user experience, right? So the aim is to simplify the user experience. Do you agree?
Correct. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. So how do they? I mean, you did cover some of these points, but how do they impact the user experience differently? What specific pain points do they each solve?
Uh, all right. So for this, I'll probably do account abstraction and chain abstraction separately, right? Now,
Yeah.
the way that we started off with account abstraction and the kind of impact it had on UX. To give you an example, is EOAs come with very long seed phrases. People have 16-word seed phrases. You have 24-word seed phrases and more. So this is again, you need to store it in a safe place. You can't really put it on a piece of paper. You don't really store it in like a a notes app in your iPhone. You ideally need to keep it in a very secure place. A lot of people have lost a lot of money just because they've misplaced it, or as humans we forget, right? So they put
For
in,
sure.
the way that I think it started off is with account abstraction. You have something like called social recovery, right? Where you can essentially set guardians who can help you sort of recover your account. Now, seed phrases are no longer the only way in which your wallet experience is defined. So for a smart contract wallet, you have things like social recovery. The second thing that is huge, and I think one of the biggest use cases, most prominent use cases, is the paymaster that came with the 4337 infrastructure. So people no longer need to be too worried about having native gas tokens. So gas has for time immemorial been like one of the biggest friction points for transactions to scale, right? um, with native gas tokens being the norm. You can't pay for gas on Polygon without Matic, right? Or Pol, as it's called now. So with the paymaster, builders can now help their user base pay for the gas on whichever chain they are by either through a gasless route, which is you can pay through stables, you can pay through say a couple of other designated tokens, or you can be paying in any other token of your choice, or sponsor transactions where the builder or the app itself pays for you gas on your behalf, and you don't even need to bother about gas. How amazing is that, right? You no longer have to do manual transactions every single time. You can auto sign for like a bunch of different transactions, and things happen a lot more seamlessly. Single click experiences become a lot more smoother as well. So this is how account abstraction, so to speak, has simplified UX, right? These are some of the pain points that AA had solved for. But the fact still remains that no matter which AA player it was from, and there is very limited, there's like about 5 to 6 players, including us, who have been building end-to-end account abstraction infrastructure. Every single one still needs to work with a set of dexes and bridges to be able to facilitate these transactions, right? So the way that I see chain abstractions impact on UX would be, firstly, there's going to be no need for manual bridging and swapping, right? Cross chain transactions can happen directly in the background. It's a lot more seamless. You don't need to worry about network switching anymore. Something that was the RPC network switching that was there was also abstracted away to to a great extent through AA and smart contract wallets. Now you don't even need to worry about the fact that this switching is happening. So that's another point. Third one is liquidity, and the way that it is managed across chains has always been a limiting factor for when you're using AA, right? Now, there is no longer going to be liquidity fragmentation. So any token can be used across any chains. So you don't need to worry about the fact that you've got USDC just sitting on a chain A, let's say Polygon. You can now, despite your USDC sitting on the Polygon chain, you can interact with anything on Arbitrum, on Optimism, on anything, right? So you can buy an NFT on Ethereum while holding your USDC on Polygon, and you don't even need to like go to a bridge for this, convert it, make sure you have enough gas, assuming that the builder or whoever has built out the platform has decided not to sponsor your transactions. So all of these things sort of get abstracted away through chain abstraction, and I think this is a huge, very significant impact in terms of the kind of user experience we can build, because user experience should not just be smooth or seamless, it needs to also be consistently reliable. So there is no point if a kind of infrastructure can enable a smooth experience, but there are lapses in the way that it goes about doing this. So chain abstraction, I think, sort of plugs into, sort of empowers, uh, sort of rides on what AA has already been working towards, making it a lot more consistent experience and a lot more smoother as well.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with you. I mean, more than an opinion, these are facts, and I feel like every day we are getting closer to that sort of modern day bank apps you have on your mobile, where you can have a number of different currencies, and you're spending. You want to buy something, and the app just goes ahead and takes care of the fragmental liquidity
Yeah.
problem. If you have, let's say, you need to buy something for $150. Maybe you only have $100 on your account, but maybe you have, let's say, 500 euros, and it just goes uh, and directly takes the liquidity from where it's possible to do so. And I feel that as a new, still relatively new technology, we need to get closer to that user experience before we can think about onboarding the next billion users.
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I feel like we're heading the right sort of the right path, at least. So we've been talking about the user experience, because as we said and repeated, this is all about the user experience, about making the user experience um, seamless. But Etherspot is building for developers, right? So I feel like we can't forget developers here. So one of the questions I wanted to ask is, what does integrating account abstraction versus chain abstraction look like on the developer side? Are there key similarities in implementation, or are they fundamentally different technical challenges?
So, um, like there are similarities and differences. I wouldn't say that they're radically different in terms of implementation, especially from a developer point of view. So when a developer is doing an AA integration, they essentially need to figure out how to implement and manage smart contract wallets. They need to figure out, how do they want to abstract away the gas. They need to figure out how is it that your session keys management needs to look like. What are your recovery features that you want to be doing? How does your bundler, put together your transactions? How does it submit user ops? These sorts of things. Whereas for chain abstraction, when you're integrating that, you need to figure out how is it that you can integrate cross chain messaging protocols. You have a bunch. You have like layer zero that's working on it. You have Axelar, Wormhole, a bunch of them. And what the devs need to focus on here, unlike before, like where they were focusing on session keys, recovery features, and more, they need to ideally look at how is it that they handle the routing of liquidity, right? How do you sync between different states? What is your bridging mechanics looking like? These sorts of things. So I would say that, very roughly speaking, directly answering the question that you asked, the similarities are that even, there's going to be core infrastructure that sort of enables this, but the similarities are that you still have a certain set of middleware solutions, right? It's not something that can be built out in house completely. And they obviously involve a lot of different smart contract sort of interactions. But where they start to differ is that while account abstraction is focused more on the wallet experience and the way that the user authenticates transactions and more within their wallet, chain abstraction is more focused on once the wallet, sort of the user has gone beyond the wallet and the transaction is out onto the chain. How is it that at the protocol level, how is it that the interoperability can function, right? How is it that this particular transaction can be made as seamless and sort of implemented in the best way possible, so that the user benefits? That's essentially, I think, where the similarities and the differences would lie, especially from the context of developers.
Yeah, sounds good. So basically, could we say that account abstraction and chain abstraction can seamlessly work together?
Yeah, yeah. I think they don't just seamlessly work together, they seamlessly work together because they complement each other, right? Now,
Yeah.
just to sort of, dig a little bit deeper into this, you have, I'm not sure if if the listeners have heard about the cake framework, right? You have multiple layers in which, any sort of dApp functions. You have the application layer at which the dApp essentially is built and presented to the users. You have a permissions layer where you've got like a bunch of intents, you've got key management, and account abstraction essentially functions at this layer, at the permissions layer. Then you've got another two layers. You've got the solver layer and you've got the settlement layer. And the solver layer is essentially where you've got, sequencing which happens, you've got routing of liquidity, you've got private computation, mempools, all of these things. And then of course the last is, you have the settlement layer where you manage your liquidity, you have, the actual execution and settlement of your transactions, right? So this is essentially the cake framework, just to sort of, these four layers constitute that. And account abstraction, which has mainly been, functioning at the permissions layer, now, and you've got your, bundlers which work with mempools, which are ideally on the solver layer. Then now you start looking at going deeper, right? You start looking at, can we also start interacting with elements in the settlement layer? How is it that we can make things a lot more efficient? So it basically means that you've got a bunch of stuff, in very simple words, you've got a bunch of stuff at the permissions layer working with a bunch of stuff in the deeper layers. So this is, I think, just a, a great way to illustrate that AA and chain abstraction, while they are different things, they also sort of complement each other in a way that simplifies UX so much more efficiently and sensibly, right? So example use cases are, as we've been discussing, that, a smart contract wallet can be used to pay, it can be used to allow users to pay in any pay gas in any token. With a cross chain abstraction layer, you can also automatically execute these transactions on different blockchains, right? So but, in the end you still get a seamless experience. That's the goal, and this seamless experience just got a lot more seamless with chain abstraction coming into the picture.
Yeah. Um, so I think it's a really interesting what you mentioned. You were talking about the cake framework and how we're getting deeper, right, into deeper layers of the whole
Yes, yes.
blockchain. Exactly. So yeah, I can understand how you say they complement each other in a way that basically we solve like a more problem that was maybe more on the surface, and now that we scratch the surface, we start going deeper, right, into
Correct. Correct.
that iceberg. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
So okay, so this question, um, I feel like I really, I've been wanting to do it for quite some time because, some people argue, we've seen this on crypto Twitter a couple of times. So yeah, you see some people arguing that maybe account abstraction hasn't yet driven the mass adoption expected, and some believe that chain abstraction will take over in fulfilling that mission. So I wanted to have your take on this. How do you feel about this? Do you feel that that's a misconception, or do you feel like there's a reasoning behind that logic? Yeah, overall, how do you feel about this?
Now that's a that puts me in a bit of a spot because I would definitely agree that account abstraction has sort of not driven the kind of mass adoption that you would see. Definitely. Even numbers sort of include. I'm not. I could be wrong, but I think less than 10 to 15% of all the transactions happening on chain are routed through smart contract wallets. Less than that are essentially your user ops. So I do agree to that, but there are certain reasons also why AA adoption has been slow, right? The first thing is the majority so account abstraction is still relatively young, so to speak, right? It came out in sort of end of 2023, 2024 is when a lot of the work was happening and a lot of the progress was happening and a lot of traction was being generated. So you need to understand this, but EOAs have been there for significantly longer, more than twice as long, right? So a lot of the wallets like MetaMask and a few of the entrenched players, so to speak, still use EOAs. I'll touch upon this as well. Not to say, but especially over the last 6 months, you've seen a very significant transition of the big folks like MetaMask, Trust Wallet. In fact, Trust Wallet is somebody who also uses the Etherspot infrastructure to smart contract wallet and the paymaster infrastructure mainly to power a certain set of transactions and user ops. So my point is, but the majority chunk, right, it's just in these last 6 months to 1 year that these transitions are starting to happen. So this is one of the key reasons that I see that made the adoption for account abstraction very slow, right? It's just now that people are starting to adopt these smart contract wallets and just starting to scale them. The second thing is that you know this adoption itself, because of the fact that the ERC 4337 is so new and so are the related standards, it'll take time. It is a function of time because every time you bring in a new set of infrastructure, people need to understand it, they need to familiarize themselves, and they need to see how it plugs into an immediate need, right? Everybody, let's say you are building a dApp, Alex. You have a roadmap already in place. It just so happens that there's a new development in the industry. Yes, we've marketed it, publicized it, everybody speaks about it as the next big thing, but for you that means additional dev bandwidth in helping them understand what this is, allocating a certain amount of resources towards experimenting with it, and then making sure that this fits in seamlessly to me and sort of helps you generate revenue, traction, whatever it might be. So there's that. But now, chain abstraction, right? Now, once this starts to come into play, what it does is that yes, it does, have the same set of problems that I was speaking about, which is, it's very new. People need to learn about the infrastructure and more, but it also sort of directly addresses a a much more immediate demand. I think anybody who's built a particular dApp at and scaled it to a certain level in terms of transactions, in terms of users, whatever that might be, everybody has a huge set of concerns with respect to liquidity, right? The interoperability between multiple chains is still abysmally low, right? And if you are able to sort of focus, let's say you're building a very simple staking protocol, right? You have a new chain that has launched probably, let's say, or there's already a very good player, let's say Arbitrum or somebody, where you are like, that they're giving a good amount of ecosystem support, they're giving out grants, they're supporting you, and even you don't want to get into the hassle of dealing with multiple blockchains, getting multiple grants and more. So you're like, hey, I'm going to stick to Arbitrum. If you can just focus on building your dApp and making it and have a great user experience on Arbitrum, you're able to build a great relationship with the other dApps and other players in the ecosystem within Arbitrum, with the network, and sort of this whole synergy starts to kick off. With chain abstraction, what happens is that while your users can now also start coming in from other chains, You can have people who are using any token to interact with your platform, and they don't even need to care about whether you're on Arbitrum or you're on Avalanche or you're on Polygon or on Ethereum, right? So chain abstraction, because it brings this huge benefit, which is orders of magnitude, more important for anybody who wants to build meaningful applications. I think this is something that chain abstraction will sort of take over a lot faster, and can actually sort of accelerate the adoption of even the smart wallets, which are an integral part of AA infrastructure, right? You speak to any users, especially these power users who are very active on chain. Nobody loves to bridge their assets, Alex. Nobody. I have interacted with a bunch of bridges, and it doesn't matter how big a bridge is or how big a bridging aggregator is. There is, at the back of my head, there is still a certain amount of anxiety associated with it, right? There's a certain amount of anxiety associated with slippage. If there is a project that I greatly believe in, but their token liquidity is just abysmal, the slippage goes to, like, I don't know, 10, 20, 25% as well, right? So when you chain abstraction sort of solves the majority of these concerns and makes things so much more seamless, right? So I believe that, because, and this is what sort of makes chain abstraction as the next natural evolution of AA, and that's how I feel about it. Like, chain abstraction alone won't solve everything, but you will still need better wallets, and a more smoother, more coherent wallet experience, which is something that only AA can make happen. But we can't deny the fact that chain abstraction makes everything around the wallet and the entire user experience around the wallet so much more smoother and simpler.
Yeah, I really liked your answer, and I think it aligns a bit with my thinking. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, so chain abstraction came along, and we, it's normal for people to be positive and expect it to be, the next big thing, and really take that step further in improving the user experience. But as you said, it isn't doing it by itself. So, I feel like, in a way, um, if it does if it does have that effect that we all expect it and want it to have, it's because, it's not because of of account abstraction, but it's because, in a way, it's because account abstraction is also there doing its part. So basically, now you can uh take what account abstraction was doing, take it a step further. It's not changing what account abstraction is doing,
Right.
because, as you said, they are on different layers. But you just get like a better package, that already includes, because AA is already there. Uh,
Yeah.
is this correct? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty much, pretty much. They work hand in hand. I wish I could, like, really sort of geek out on the technicals, but if I could code a little better, probably I would be able to do that. But um, I still, what I already can understand from this is so exciting and sort of very much aligns. And I think you're sort of very much on point in terms of what you've said.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've actually had a question from the audience, and they were asking if they missed talking about chain abstraction from a designer's point of view, in a way. So, although we did cover it in a bit, in terms of implementation, would you be okay with maybe providing a short answer, or briefly covering, how does chain abstraction work from the designer's point of view? Namely, let's say you're integrating Etherspot, both
Mm-hmm.
the upcoming Etherspot chain abstraction solution. So how would that look, briefly?
Sure. So I think we covered this a little bit earlier. I don't think
Hmm.
particularly, let's say, if you're talking about a designer in the sense a product designer or somebody who is a front end designer, they probably don't have much that's going to change, except for the fact that they no longer need to worry about, oh, there's, a bunch of different signature requests, there's a bunch of different pop-ups that need to come out. All of these things sort of get abstracted away, right? But from a backend perspective, especially in terms of the way that you know you would architect your product itself, and you're designing what your user flows are going to get mapped out like. When you're doing an AA integration, you would probably design a user flow where you're figuring out how is it that the paymaster is going to abstract away the gas experience. You would probably try to map out a user flow where you're designing how a social login provider is going to integrate, create your wallet, and then present that, making it ready for transactions for the user, right? You would probably looking at how is it that you need to design the social recovery part. How is it that you can set your guardians? How is it that you can make it very easy to recover your wallet? Whereas a chain abstraction, right, you would probably start looking at it differently. You would look at how is it that the different messaging protocols work together. When you're designing this experience, you're going to look at how is it that liquidity itself is getting routed, right? You're going to try and understand how is it that bridging mechanics would essentially work, so to speak. So I would say that because of the fact that these are two separate things, right? When you're designing something internally within a wallet, you're looking at wallet and wallet related features. Whereas when you have chain abstraction, you're looking at, at what are the different variables at a protocol or a blockchain level. So as a designer, specifically, I would say that these are mutually exclusive in the way that you would design, with very little overlap. So your design process would still roughly remain the same. It's just that your end user flow that gets created from end to end, right? That
Mhm.
becomes a lot more seamless because now you have control over the way that you can design things, not just at the wallet level, but also at the protocol level. And therefore, your UX becomes a lot more smoother.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for covering this question from the audience. I've realized there are other people um, who maybe would like to ask questions. Make sure to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to cover them closer to the end since we're running a bit out of time. So let's move on, Ani. So kind of starting to wrap up in a way. If you
Mhm.
could choose one major limitation of account abstraction or chain abstraction that you could solve immediately, what would it
Mhm.
be and why?
Uh, so I would say that, to be very honest, scale is basically what account abstraction is lacking the most. So I think that's one major limitation. Not enough people use smart wallets, right? Most people
Yeah.
still use EOA wallets and sort of therefore keep themselves very limited in the kind of interactions they have with on-chain assets. So until AA becomes, and the reason why I support this is because, until AA becomes a default in wallets, adoption will remain very low and very slow, and therefore it feeds straight back into the fact that scaling the adoption of AA itself becomes the major limitation. And I think the last part is better onboarding, right?
Mhm.
You have more users. This means once you have, like, account abstraction is at the wallet level, and onboarding takes place at the wallet level. There is no two ways about it. Chain abstraction does not solve for user onboarding, right? It
Mhm.
potentially, I would say, it solves for user retention. Once you've onboarded a user, you've given them a great wallet experience and a smooth wallet experience, starting from creation all the way to management, right? Then chain abstraction kicks in by saying that, hey, if you are somebody who can only experiment with $10, you can now, with chain abstraction coming in, you would have the kind of resources and it can potentially build the confidence to start scaling up your interactions on chain. So, but with that being said, chain abstraction still does have its own set of challenges. It would, you security still continue is always going to remain one of the biggest challenges for chain abstraction, and I believe it's going to be a continuous process, because when it comes to anything cross chain, exploits are always there, right? Some of the biggest hacks across, in the history of Web3 have happened near bridges, for the most part, right? Essentially, whenever there's a transfer of value from one chain to another. So cross chain exploits will always remain a concern. it will, and the biggest challenge for chain abstraction will still be security. But this is completely separate from what AA does, which is create a more seamless onboarding experience. And I think once AA picks up, which means that more users are onboarded, we can create a more beautiful experience on chain for them.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so okay, so let's wrap this up with the last question. So a brief look into the future. So looking ahead, what do you feel is next? How do you see both AA and chain abstraction shaping Web3 in the next, say, year or two?
Um, I would say that we are probably about a year or two away from smart wallets being the norm, and EOA is sort of completely becoming archaic, right? So I feel like smart wallets would be embedded in almost every major wallet provider, and going forward, every wallet builder is probably going to have smart contract wallets as the kind of base that they build out any wallet experience like. This is already happening, as we discussed, at the beginning of the space. Like Trust Wallet is a very good example of a very major wallet that is using the Etherspot infrastructure. The next thing is, I think with chain abstraction kicking in, and hopefully it gets a little more perfected over the upcoming months, Etherspot Pulse is, as you rightly mentioned, is something that we are very excited to launch in the coming months as well. And once we have these sorts of solutions and infrastructure a lot more commonplace, uh, the part where you have multi-chain experiences, I feel like you will have true multi-chain, like truly multi-chain experiences. Users will no longer need to worry about networks anymore, right? That's like thinking about when you or I would use a credit card. It does not matter to us whether we are using a Visa card or a Mastercard, right? Because those are two separate networks. Currently, us worrying about the chain that a particular DApp operates on is kind of analogous to that. So once we get to that point, I think it's a huge step in sort of a Web2 like user experience where users don't need to know about any chain that they're on. So the kind of future that I would imagine is something like a world where you log into a DApp, you can use any token that is there to pay for your transaction. Gas is abstracted away, and you can execute transactions from one network to another network, and you just need to focus on the kind of transaction you're making, nothing else. So I think that's the beauty of account abstraction and chain abstraction working together, and I think that's going to be the norm going forward.
Thank you very much, Annie. So yeah, basically it's clear that account abstraction and chain abstraction are not competing concepts, but rather complementary solutions that will hopefully drive Web3 toward a more user-friendly, accessible, and truly interoperable experience, right? So where while AA has been evolving, for years, but then again we look at it, the bigger picture is not being that long, right? So it's still fairly new, and I completely agree with your vision. So yeah, okay. So I'm covering another question that we've been asked in the chat. Uh, Basically, we have a user asking if Etherspot is building AA or chain abstraction wallet, or if it's building its own blockchain. So no, but basically, Etherspot is um, creates uh, infrastructure tools for Web3 developers who can then, for example, build their own, say, wallet with the tools we provide, right? And would you like to add anything to that, Annie? Or
Yeah, I think essentially, we Etherspot is an infrastructure provider for different networks, L1s, L2s, L3s, whoever that might be. We provide the infrastructure for a particular network so that their entire ecosystem has access to all of these features that we've been discussing, right? Smart wallets, bundlers, paymasters, access to cross chain liquidity, all of these things. So we essentially provide the infrastructure, enable the ecosystem to use these services. And what we provide would be, this is done in the form of an SDK, in the form of a set of APIs, all of these things. So, no, we are not building blockchains, but we are essentially empowering them.
Exactly. So yeah, basically, if you're a developer and you're looking to build, the next gen decentralized application, you want to power it with account or chain abstraction, make sure to check out our SDKs and our tools. And if you missed any part of today's talk, don't worry, we'll be sharing the recording shortly. Make sure to follow us for updates. You can explore our documentation and SDKs, and make sure to join our Discord as well. Once again, thank you very much, Hani, for joining. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for asking questions. Um, and yeah, see you in the next one.
Absolutely. Great chatting with you, Alex. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next one.
You too. See you.
Take care. Bye bye.
All right.